While we were planning on tying up the case of William Britton today with a nice tidy bow, it seems that his case becomes very complicated. We will walk through the jury rulings and the appellate court rulings and Britton's escape attempt. However, keep an eye peeled for testimonies concerning Britton during the upcoming Marcum, Cox, and Hargis trials. These trials will affect his cases through the court system and vice versa. That is the reason why we have him a bit out of the order in the timeline, because his case was so important to the others. Come along with us as we try to untangle the legal web in which William Britton finds himself. All aboard the Kentucky-Tennessee Living Time Machine. Please fasten your seatbelts and keep your arms and legs inside of the vehicle at all times. But to get going, we still need your help. We still need to fire up that time machine to transport us. Please help us by clicking on the like, subscribe, and bell notification buttons down below. Not only does this fire up the time machine, but it convinces YouTube that we need a bigger time machine to reach more people who love history as much as you do. Now, back to our story. The Breathitt County trial. As we alluded to with the witnesses last week, there was a trial for the murder of James Cockrell that did take place in Breathitt County. This was a grand jury that was gathering evidence concerning the death of Cockrell. As the witnesses were done giving their testimony and the evidence had been given, the jury went into their chambers to deliberate. Egbert Hargis burst into the jury chambers and basically threatened the jury not to consider the testimony of Riley Coldiron in the case. Through fear and intimidation, the jury closed the case and would not deliberate further, which caused a mistrial. Thinking that the cases were finished, those in Breathitt County thought that they would have to face no further charges. That was until the cases began opening up in Fayette County, Kentucky. Because Cockrell had died in Fayette County, this left the door wide open for the cases to be brought before the county courts there. The Hargises had no political sway in the county, so it was thought that this would be a fair trial. Many motions would be made to dismiss the cases, and the Appellate Court of Kentucky would have to rule on the matter. Jury passes judgment. In the Fayette County Court, the witnesses all had testified. The public testimonies can be found in Part 2 of the trial of William Britton, and the evidence had been presented. Now it was time for the jury to deliberate. This took several days. Finally, the jury came out of the room and gave their verdict. According to the Hazel Green Herald, dated February 2, 1905, quote, Britton gets life sentence. Unless the Court of Appeals reverses the Fayette Circuit Court, William Britton must end his days in the penitentiary with Curtis Jett for the murder of James Cockrell in Breathitt County. Quote, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty as charged in the indictment and fix his punishment as confinement in the penitentiary for life. Unquote. John Shea, foreman. Thus, a Fayette County jury yesterday condemned the second of the band of conspirators and assassins which have terrorized Breathitt County and brought to a dramatic close another chapter for the struggle of the law for supremacy. When Judge Parker arrived and the jury filed slowly in, Deputy Circuit Court Richard Colbert received the verdict from the hands of Judge Parker, to whom the foreman of the jury delivered it, and read it amid profound silence. At the word guilty, the defendant and his attorneys were visibly affected. Lexington Herald, unquote. This was a shocking verdict to the people who were present in the courtroom. For the first time, someone who had not been directly identified as the shooter was being charged with conspiracy of a crime. The attorneys of the case rose for an immediate motion to dismiss the verdict and ask for a retrial. From another article in the Breathitt County News, quote, Britton refused new trial. The motion for a new trial for William Britton was overruled last Saturday, and Britton was sentenced to the penitentiary. But a stay of proceedings was granted for 60 days pending an appeal to the Court of Appeals, unquote. So Britton remained in the Fayette County Jail for the next 60 days until a decision concerning the case could be heard before the Kentucky Court of Appeals. Since the answer from the appellate court did not happen until the following October, it is supposed that Britton was taken to the Kentucky State Prison for incarceration. There would be two rulings from the appellate court, almost back to back, concerning the conspiracy case. The first was concerning the right to try the Hargis brothers and Ed Callahan in Fayette County, Kentucky. The first Court of Appeals decision. In the Hartford Republican dated March 17, 1905, quote, the decision of the Court of Appeals which gives to Fayette County the jurisdiction to try James, Alex, and Elbert Hargis and Ed Callahan for the murder of James Cockrell, Marshal of the town of Jackson, Breathitt County, in 1902, marks an important step in the progress of law-abiding citizens of the state to redeem from the depths of legal prostitution to which corrupt method and clique rule has precipitated a growing and prosperous section of Kentucky. The facts concerning the crime for which the county judge and a member of the state Democratic Committee, an ex-state senator, and a private citizen, all three brothers, and the sheriff of Breathitt County are all in Fayette County Jail awaiting trial, are brief, but without parallel, unquote. The rest of the article basically states that the men conspired together to instigate the crime of murder of Town Marshal James Cockrell. They were now arrested and in the same jail cell with Caleb Powers, who was incarcerated for alleged conspiracy in the Goebel assassination. A $100,000 bond had been placed in order to secure a fair trial and had been placed against the men to prevent the four of them from using money to sway the decision. A failed escape attempt. Yes, believe it or not, William Britton, just like many of our other Appalachian outlaws, does try to escape from prison. After sitting in the Kentucky State Prison, Britton must not have seen any hope for his case being tried before the Kentucky State Appellate Court. According to the Breathitt County News in the May 25, 1906 edition, quote, Britton fails to escape. A wholesale attempt at jail delivery was made at Lexington at an early hour last Saturday morning, and had it not been for the bungling effort of Richard Yelton, Bill Britton, under the sentence for life for the murder of James Cockrell at Jackson, and Benjamin Stewart, charged with the murder of James Stewart at Lexington, would perhaps now be free. By the use of a case knife which he used as a saw, Yelton, a trustee, cut the bars on the third floor of the jail, and with a rope made from strips from his blanket, he attempted to lower himself to the ground. He fell, and the noise made by the fall attracted the attention of people nearby. Yelton escaped, but the crowd which gathered kept Stewart and Britton from getting away, unquote. So the three guys that were in the prison had broken out of the jail, but because Yelton had made a noise when he fell to the ground, it alerted people around him, and the other two men were recaptured and taken back to their jail cells. This would be the only attempt made by Britton to escape, as recorded in the newspapers. Reversed decision. Even though Britton had tried to escape, the decision for his case before the appellate court finally came in October of 1906. Britton would indeed have his retrial. This would make the third time that Britton would face the jury over the crime of the murder of James Cockrell. The first time was a hung jury in Breathitt County, and the second trial was in Fayette County. According to the Hopkinsville Kentuckian on October 6, 1906, quote, the Court of Appeals has reversed the life sentence of Bill Britton, one of the convicted murderers of Marshal James Cockrell of Jackson nearly 5 years ago. The admission of incompetent evidence was given as the grounds of the reversal, unquote. According to the Bourbon News on October 6, 1906, quote, Britton gets new trial. The Court of Appeals by Commissioner Carroll yesterday reversed the judgment of the Fayette Circuit Court in the case of Bill Britton versus the Commonwealth. Britton was given a life sentence for the shooting of James Cockrell at Jackson in July 1902. Cockrell having been removed to Lexington where he died, thus giving Fayette County the right to try the case. The case was remanded to the Fayette Circuit Court for retrial with instructions. The ground of reversal is incompetent evidence, unquote. It is really not stated if they took into account the testimony of Riley Codiron or not, or if it even had a bearing on the appellate court ruling. A ruling of incompetent evidence means that a piece of evidence that was not relevant, immaterial, or had no bearing to the case at hand was admitted into the case before the jury. So this could have been the evidence against Cold Iron, or it could have been that Britton was wanted in Lee County, Virginia for the 1899 murder of a man there. Whatever it was, evidence was admitted that should have never been presented or should have been struck from the record. Britton faces new charges of murder. Britton must have felt relief that he was going to be set free from the Kentucky State Prison to face a new trial. However, this feeling was not long-lived, because as soon as this ruling was made, 2 other counties stepped in with warrants for Britton's arrest concerning the other 2 killings. According to the Mount Sterling Advocate, quote, "New warrant ready for Bill Britton." At Lexington, Kentucky, a bench warrant from the Breathitt County awaits Bill Britton when he gives the bond of $7,500 fixed in the case against him for the murder of James Cockrell. The Breathitt warrant is for his arrest on the charge of complicity in the murder of Dr. B.D. Cox at Jackson. James and Elbert Hargis and Ed Callahan are also charged with Dr. Cox's murder, unquote. We will get more into why the conspirators were tried for the murder of Dr. Cox in the wrongful death case of attorney Marcum. More evidence of the conspiracy will come to light, and it will cast a long shadow on the next jury trial of Britton. In the May 31, 1907 edition of the Breathitt County News, quote, "Bill Britton, taken to Sandy Hook for trial." William Jenkins of the Lexington Police Department left Lexington for Sandy Hook, Elliott County, last Saturday, having in charge Bill Britton. Britton recently executed bond in the Fayette Circuit Court for the murder of James Cockrell and will execute bond for $10,000 in the Elliott County for the murder of Dr. Cox. He was accompanied to Sandy Hook by his wife, who had spent much of her time in Lexington since the arrest of her husband. The Britton party were met at Moorhead by James Hargis and others from Breathitt County, and the trip to Sandy Hook was made by wagon Sunday. Britton was delivered to the jailer of Elliott County Monday morning, and immediately executed bond with Alex Hargis and G.W. Swall as sureties, unquote. According to the Winchester News, quote, L.L. Britton goes to the state of Virginia. Is taken there by Sheriff of Lee County to answer charge of murder. W.Y. Tucker, Sheriff of Lee County, Virginia, passed through this city Wednesday morning on his way from Moorhead to Virginia, with Bill Britton, who is wanted at this place on the charge of murder that it is alleged that he committed by him in 1899. Britton is also charged with the murder of Jim Cockrell at Jackson several years ago and is now out on a $10,000 bond, unquote. From here, the story of the trials of Britton takes an unusual turn. While the Hargises and Callahans were fighting against being arrested for the same conspiracy that Britton was convicted of, they were also fighting against the widow Marcum and the Cox families for the murders of their family members. We will first dive into the lawsuit brought by the widow Marcum and how this will bring more evidence and arrests in the bloody Breathitt County War. Thank you. We at Kentucky Tennessee Living would like to thank you for watching our video series on the Appalachian feuds. Don't forget to hit that like button, as the more likes we receive, the more likely YouTube is to suggest our videos to other viewers. Also, to receive notice when we upload a new video, be sure to subscribe and click the bell notification. We thank you for continuing to support Kentucky Tennessee Living as we are discovering the mysteries in Appalachian history.